Welcome to the video on apoptosis. So we've got quite a big study design point here. It's actually going to be broken down into 3 videos on content, and then there's 2 exam questions that I'm going to walk through with you after that, just to give us some examples of how they might ask you about apoptosis. So apoptosis is actually a pretty cool process that happens in the body. It happens in a lot of other organisms as well, but mostly we're going to focus on animals as our model. All right, so it's a natural regulatory process of programmed cell death. This essentially is cells dying, yeah, and that's called apoptosis, like a pop process, osis, yeah. So we've got that popping of a cell, and that's the way that I want you to remember it. We're going to look at the 2 ways that it's initiated, via the mitochondrial pathway and the death receptor pathway. Death receptor. Yeah, and then we're going to look at the process of apoptosis itself. So I'm going to flip everything on its head, and we're going to start with a bit of what is apoptosis. And so we're on page 7 in your notes. And apoptosis is simply the death of cells, which is normal. Okay, so the death of cells which occurs as a normal and controlled part of an organism's growth and development. And we're going to watch what happens. So watch the yellow cell right in the middle of the screen and just see. You can see that it's turned purple and then it's breaking apart. Yeah, it's not leaking though. That's a really interesting observation. I want you to make any other observations while you're watching this. So think about, what can you see? So there's going to be 2 more cells that are undergoing apoptosis. There's going to be that little purple cell in the middle of the screen at the top, and the big yellowish purple cell down the bottom. All right, so they're the ones you're going to focus on. While you're watching these, I want you to think about why this is going to happen. Yeah, why would, oh, there's the one at the top, and now the one at the bottom. Why would cells want to die? Now, hopefully you've had a chance to think. If you haven't had a chance to think, just pause before I keep going. All right. So I'm going to give you 4 reasons why cells might want to die. Hopefully some of these were ones that you guessed in the process. So the first one is you need to be able to regulate the number of cells in your body. If you can't kill off cells, then how's that going to work? Yeah, if you just keep building new cells, mitosis keeps happening if you've done unit 2, and you just keep making more and more and more cells, eventually your body is just going to not be able to cope with it. Yeah, so you have to be able to get rid of the number of cells, or keep the number of your cells regulated. The other thing is you need to remove cells that you don't need anymore. And I'll go through a couple of examples on the next slide as to what they are, and you need to jot these into your notes just underneath the why does apoptosis occur. Also, we need to remove cells with damaged DNA. So what might damage your DNA? The biggest example of what can damage your DNA is actually outside. Yeah, the sun. The sun is a really good source of UV radiation. Now, UV radiation can penetrate past our skin, and it can get into our nuclei of our cells. Now, once it's in the nuclei of our cells, what it will do to our DNA is it will break it apart, or it will cause a mutation. And what do we know about mutations? I know we haven't done too much on them yet because we haven't done unit 4, but mutations can be harmful. They can end up producing proteins that are bad for the cell. So we don't want to allow cells with damaged DNA to replicate. So apoptosis is really useful to get rid of damaged cells. Now, the damage for apoptosis, and this is where the distinction is, it has to be within the cell, yeah, that DNA damage. It's not to do with illness, okay? And the last one is sometimes things go wrong in our cells and they break down, or they need repair. And if you can't repair them, there's no point in keeping them around. It's kind of like just keeping a broken toy on a shelf going, yeah, I'm just going to keep this around because of sentimental value. Now, our body doesn't have sentimental value when it comes to our cells. So what it's going to do is it's going to get rid of those cells that we can't repair. And so there are 4 reasons why that can happen. I want to link that to things that happen in your bodies every single month. Yeah. So what we should be looking at, and of course my screen is going to freeze. Let's bring it back. Is this guy. Yeah. You all undergo the menstrual cycle. Here we go. There's much better. All right. So the menstrual cycle is a good example of apoptosis. So every month we build up and up and up the layers of our endometrial lining. Yeah, and that's readying our body for the implantation of a fertilized egg so that we can procreate and have babies. But I'm guessing that none of you really want to have a baby right now. And so what happens is your body needs to get rid of this lining. Yeah. And so it takes quite a few days. It takes about 14 days, maybe a bit longer, maybe a bit less, depending on what your cycle is, to get all the hormones ready to initiate this bit here. Yeah. So this bit here is your period. Yeah, that's your menstruation. And what it is it's apoptosis of the cells of the lining of your uterus. So what you are doing when you're bleeding is you're actually shedding the dead cells from your endometrial lining. So you're going to think about it differently next time you get your period. But every time you get your period, your body is undergoing apoptosis. It's getting rid of cells that are no longer required. So that's reason number 2 in your list just above. Now, there's another really cool example that you might not think about, and that's this one. When we are in utero, so again, we're talking about babies here. When we're in utero, this is what our embryonic hand looks like. And I can't even show you, yeah? It looks like this. It's just a paddle. Now, that's not going to help me very much when I go to hold a pen. Yeah, I need the dexterity of my fingers. This is part of what makes humans so much more. It's part of what helped us to evolve into the top of the food chain organism with our great cognitive ability. Without fingers and without hands, we wouldn't be anywhere near as useful. So what happens is apoptosis occurs in between each one of these sections. So apoptosis will kind of happen like this, and as a result, you end up with fingers. How cool is that? So people that have, you might have heard stories about people that have webbed fingers, so they might not have a complete gap here. They might have a bit of skin that's between there, and that's because apoptosis was incomplete. So what I've just done is I've gone through why apoptosis occurs and 2 examples of apoptosis occurring in the human body. Pretty cool. Next video, I'm going to talk about the steps in apoptosis.